Working with Componeer around and onto crowns, complementing the chapter Componeer on crowns. In this chapter, we saw that it is definitely possible to reconstruct homogeneous surfaces on existing crowns together with existing teeth. The diagnosis is in the center. We have a number of different foundations in the background and need to homogenize these with composite. Things become interesting if there are no options. In case of a single crown, one could still have alternatives. Nonetheless, patients with full crown bridge restorations often wish for even more beautiful teeth. In this case, we're dealing with a full bridge, which spans the entire dental arch. This cannot be readily renewed, but it can be made more attractive. As we've learned, the ceramic surface is ground for this purpose, sandblasted and conditioned with silane solution, and, if necessary, stained on the cervical margins. Then it can be ready for Componeer. But the patient must always be informed that the bonding force of composite on ceramic is somewhat less than on a natural tooth. However, in the case of major reconstructions, this should actually not be a problem. However, there are cases where we face slight problems because we are really not too sure as to what we should do. For example, in this clinical case, crowns are present, and the dark aspect of the cervical region indicates that not everything is quite as it should be. Most likely, these are root-treated teeth with attempts at composite restoration. We perform a diagnosis to see what the situation would look like if we adapted it to the lips. At the same time, we check the X-ray to find out what the underlying problem of the teeth is. And this is what we see: post-crowns and root treatments, and occlusion is incomplete. We wanted to meet the patient's wish for a more attractive smile, so we decided to remove all the old restorations in the anterior tooth region. The crowns were removed, the old composite was ground down, and this is the remaining base. Lumiaxial glass fiber posts were placed in the root-treated teeth and colour-stained. As described in the chapter on colour management and staining, the dark areas and the translucent areas of the posts were coated with opacers. Then the dentine mass was used to match the background to the colour of the teeth and the base reconstructed. And finally, the componeers could be placed in a neat row. Then the teeth were returned to their normal position according to the gingiva or the lip profile, so the occlusion line more or less corresponds to the upper lip. There are extensive reconstructions of old bridges and old crowns where not everything is at the 100% level in the gingival region. You can see these very, very long black tooth necks after the old crowns. One makes a diagnosis to see what it could look like. It would be difficult to retain the size proportions in this situation. And this is what it looks like around the dental dam. We have these old crowns in a slightly suspended position. One would probably have to reduce the gingiva somewhat to shorten the crowns, as was the decision. These are post crowns. I say that because they were ground down as it was impossible to remove them. They were also partially splinted, It is always risky removing post crowns with long posts in anterior teeth or posterior teeth, as this could lead to root fracture. The patient decided against extraction, as she did not want to take the risk. If one is confronted with the remains of abutments, it is extremely important to stain these or cover them completely with opaquer. Not only buccally but also palatal, as the metal on the back would otherwise be reflected back to the translucent composite surface. This reflection would then be noticeable as a grey film in the interdental space. This is why it is essential to stain the background with opaquer. One can already anticipate losing some of the proportions of the positions even before removing the crowns. Where is the center, and how about the length? This is why it makes sense to make a silicone key right at the start, so that one knows where the center lines are and where the incisal edges will be. One can reconstruct on the palatal side with dentine mass and then proceed to add buccally. Here you can see the halfway situation. On the one side, the stained stump abutments covered with dentine. On the other side, the componeers have already been placed on the surface. And you can see how the situation changes from left to right. If we take the componeer white opalescent and complement it with dentine mass, the teeth automatically achieve greater brilliance. Nonetheless, we have a warm shade in the cervical regions, and as a final outcome, this gives natural integration into the lip profile. Due to its strength, metal was used for a long time, as in this case. In fact, the patient wanted to have the entire front restored with componeer. We experienced a number of problems simultaneously. On the one hand, the pontic does not fit the gingiva 100%, and on the other hand, the steel or gold sleeves shimmer through the existing tooth, resulting in a slightly grey character. For the reasons mentioned before, making a new replacement from metal is out of the question. Grinding the teeth to reconstruct the bridge is also not an option. Basically, this only leaves us with a restoration using formative materials. To this purpose, a composite pontic was fixated to the neighbouring teeth using a glass fibre band. Attention was paid to ensure that superfloss or a brush could still be used to clean between the teeth and the pontic. Then the pontic was complemented. Once this base has been completed, the componeers can be placed on the surface and worked up. Now you can observe a situation which is not homologized. On the one hand, the pontic, which is relatively opaque, and on the other, the slight grey film on the neighbouring teeth. Upon completion with componeer, you can see how the pontic improves in appearance. This is because we achieved the necessary translucency in the background with the dentine mass, and we no longer use any metal. This example too is all about individual crowns. We can see a crown on the lateral incisor, and also here on the central incisor, as well as an overcontour in the cervical region. So something's not right here. We have bacterial adhesion and thus periodontal damage, which appears to be progressing. Then the crowns were removed. And of course, the stumps were stained with white opaque in the same manner. Staining was again circular, be it on the gold stump or the metal post here. Then they were coated with dentine and covered with componeer. In retrospect, one can see how the gingiva slowly begins to recuperate. Cervical reddening has disappeared and the papillae slowly regenerate. In this sense, this has proved a good alternative to inadequate crowns. Here again, a single-tooth crown. The objective was to close the diastema at the same time. If one looks carefully, one can see that we're also dealing with an exposed root surface here. This root surface was also stained after removing the crown. Again, the background was worked up with dentine mass and then finally covered with the componeer. Compared with the initial situation, here we can see the opaque number 1 with a crown. The inconsistent gaps between the teeth were all homogenized with componeer. The color shade is now identical, and the tooth shapes and the occlusion level to the lip profile are in harmony.